Hey everyone, welcome back to part two of this prep conversation that Bryce and I are having. Last week, just kind of dove into talking about our thoughts as coaches, our goals as coaches leading up to competing, leading up to the stage, peak week included. And we thought about it and it's probably a good idea, especially again, just peak competition season, to cover what's it like working with an athlete, what are our goals coming out of our season, right? Heading into off season. What are our, main takeaways from prep that we maybe want to carry over as far as our intentionality and our design is concerned? And also what are our just main focuses and pitfalls that we're trying to avoid, both with, the program itself, but also the client, because there is a heavy emotional, mental aspect. As a coach there, you're juggling that and making sure you're tempering some things and trying to keep a level of motivation and encouragement, but not so much so that you shoot yourself in the foot and you overdo it and you end up in a tough spot. So without giving too much away, I'll kind of pivot and not pivot, I'll pitch it to Bryce and let him kind of do what he did with the previous episode, where he kind of just gave a conceptual overview of, coming out of a show and what that looks like. And then we can dive in on a more conversational tone on certain pieces.
Yeah, so I'll probably just start by, let me make sure fucking microphone is working. Anyway, I'll probably start by giving a quick wrap up of where we left off on the last episode. So for anybody who did not listen to that, I would highly recommend that you go back. It's a relatively short one, but we did cover quite a bit in terms of talking about prep and peak week and what you should expect going into a show. Obviously, now we're going to be talking about coming out of the show. Where we left off was very deliberately drawing parallels between prep and pregnancy, and drawing parallels between coming out of prep and the postpartum period, and talking about why it is so important that programming changes and the training that you're doing is keeping up with the physical changes that are happening to your body. Not even physical either, like in total, but also psychological too. Psychological changes are such a big aspect of what's going on as you come out of a show. And that's one big thing that we will continue to touch on and broach as we have this conversation. But so you come out of the show, you just competed. Most people compete on Saturdays. So you're generally going to have a Sunday to just fuck around, bullshit. Most people are going to eat until they puke, but please don't do that. And then Monday rolls around and it is back to some kind of structure, hopefully, right? And it is very important to have some semblance of structure. I cannot emphasize that enough. It is going to be very tempting to want to throw away all the structure that you've been following because you're probably so burnt out on following a plan, following macros, going to the gym at 4 a.m. and doing an hour of cardio. I get it. It's psychologically, you just don't want anything to do with that shit at that point, and you probably just want to bury yourself in Ben and Jerry's and just fuck around for a bit. Again, do not do that. It is so important to nail the post-show period to make sure that if you are a competitor, if you're someone who does this recreationally or at a high level and you want to continue doing it, it is very, very, very important that you nail this post-show period. Honestly, feel strongly that the first month is an extended prep. You have to treat it as an extended prep. It needs to be that structured. It needs to be taken that seriously. Once you get far enough away from the show, from prep, you can start to implement a bit more flexibility, but not at first. You need to be on your shit. So in terms of training, because I think that's probably where we're going to in that realm, and we can dip into other things like nutrition peripherally. But in terms of training, the first week post-show is going to be structured, but you want to pull way, way, way back. You almost want to treat that week as almost an extension of the peak week, right? So you don't need to be doing the same exact exercises. You can do, a bit lower rep range. You can do a little bit higher in terms of intensity and load, but it needs to still be that general thought process. It needs to be recovery. It needs to be reducing inflammation. It needs to be blood flow. It needs to be relatively fast paced. So that's where I typically default to whenever it comes to that first week post show. Sometimes I'll even have conversations with my clients. I'm like, hey, what are you feeling? what is your body feeling? Because if you're super beat up, that is going to dictate the exercises that I choose and the way that we're going to go about this. But if you're feeling pretty fresh still, maybe we push a smidge harder to take more advantage of the increased calories, the decreased cardio, the blood flow that you're going to be able to get. But in total, the first week is a recovery week. It is a recovery from prep or recovery from competing, like what we also talked about last show. You're going to be super sore from competing because posing is going to wreck you. And after you compete, most people go out, they have a gigantic meal, they're stuffing themselves because they're finally able to just gorge. And most people are also going to go overboard on that. Most people are not going to be drinking enough water. They're not going to stay hydrated. And all of those things combined, it does lead to a bit of pronounced soreness going into that post-show week. So again, recovery, most important thing, go through everything, treat it as blood flow, treat it as an extended deload. You want to be moving fast. You want to be breaking a sweat. You want to be going for as much pump as you can, defaulting to exercises that are mostly cables, mostly machines. Also very, very important there. All right. So first week, no barbells, no dumbbells for the most part. So cables, machines, body weight if you want to. But even with that, you're probably going to want to eliminate exercises that are potentially going to be damaging. So something that is potentially damaging, something like a dip, right? A lot of muscle damage. Hack squat, probably not the best to do the first week post show, right? Default to easy exercises that are going to allow you to maintain solid amount of muscular tension, get a big pump, break a sweat, but get in, get out, and not cause too much damage. Is there anything that you want to add post show week, the first week?
No, I think I just want to reiterate that the most important piece is recovering. And I think that if there's something that I have experienced mostly as a coach, especially, even just the first week and maybe even a little bit into the second week, it's the zeal, especially if someone had a really good showing or was very promising, like they're like very anxious to get back into the gym, right? They want to use these calories. They want to go get these pumps. They want to get the cool videos and pictures and stuff. And I just can't stress enough that this is where people get hurt. Your body is still susceptible. And I know that your energy levels have been in the fucking dumpster for the last 4 to 6 weeks. So now that you have like a little bit more carbs and, you're getting good sleep and your cardio's, dipping a little bit, you want to go, oh yeah, I can. Because while you have this energy, right, internally, your battery is getting recharged, sure, but your body is still just as susceptible as it was the previous week. And doing something that can hurt you just puts you further out of the game. So if you want to be an intentional athlete and you want to stay in this a while, like Bryce said, being very, very mindful of that is important.
Yeah, not only that, like imagine how fucking stupid you would look if you got hurt the week after you competed, right? Like just like that would be the dumbest thing ever.
Shame.
And what do you say?
So the shame should definitely stop you from doing stupid shit.
Yeah, so like don't be that person. Just go in, make it easy on yourself and treat it as a recovery week. Treat it as something that is going to be bridging the gap between your show and actual training once you start on that. But again, want to reiterate, it should be structured. It should still be structured. You should have an idea as to what you're going to be doing whenever you go into the gym during that week. Because if you don't have a plan, you're going to fuck around and you're going to do dumb shit. So prevent yourself from being able to do that. Stay one step ahead, communicate with your coach, build your own program before you go into the gym, whatever you need to do, right? But have something down, have something on paper that you can look to, you can follow, and just remove that, like what you said, that zeal to want to do too much in that post-show week. All right, moving on from that week, because that tends to be a really, really simple, straightforward week for most people, because honestly, it's just go in and do easy stuff, do relatively easy stuff. Don't cause any inroads in your recovery. Make sure that you're feeling good whenever you leave the gym, et cetera, et cetera. Whenever you get onto the other side of that week, so we're talking like weeks 2 through, let's say 5 post-show, that's whenever you're actually going to be typically on a structured program. And that program is going to be more progressive. It's going to have weekly goals. It's going to have a macro goal for it. So there is a general larger purpose for those weeks, again, 2 through 5, 6, whatever, however long it needs to be post show. That goal is still going to be recovery. So that's very important to note, right? Just because you went through one relatively easy week post show does not mean that you're fully recovered and ready to jump back into it. Not even close. Not even close, actually. So the best way of thinking about this is until your calories are back up to a maintenance level, you're still recovering. Your systems are still suppressed, including everything that you would be doing in the gym. So your muscular system, or your neurological system, your neuromuscular system, everything is suppressed, your hormones. So until everything there, your diet comes back up to a good baseline, including getting blood work done and making sure that everything is cleared, everything checks out, everything is in normal levels, right? Unless you're on PEDs, then obviously you're not being counted here. But again, normal levels for things like your thyroid, things like your sex hormones for the most, etc. Because again, there's no point in you going in and training super fucking hard if your FSH is super depressed, right? If your hormones are jacked up, and them being jacked up is because of prep. It's a function of you prepping really hard for an extended period of time. It just means that your body's under recovered. It needs more time to get back to that baseline. So if you going into the gym and beating yourself up and training super hard, you're counteracting what you're trying to do, what your other goal is. So always in the back of your mind, remember what your overarching goal is in any given moment. In that immediate push-up period, it is going to be recovery. And the important thing here is that that is going to be different for every single person. And I can't emphasize that enough. It will take some people 6 months to get back to fully recovered in the state that they were before they entered prep. It's very genetic. And I would say for that person that it takes 6 months, maybe consider a different sport. Like if it takes you that long to recover post-show, maybe this isn't something that you need to continue doing because you're going to wreck your body long term. And maybe your hormones won't bounce back next time. So something to consider. But for most people, we're looking at like 8 to 12 weeks until they're relatively ready to go and ready to push into something more resembling off-season training. But what I think is very important is where do we bridge that gap between the show and getting you all the way back to ready for off-season training? And that's where something like, I mean, I like to think of them as transition blocks or bridge blocks, whatever. But the way that I tend to design these things is carrying over some of the general ideas from that post-show week and mostly sticking with machines, cables, body weight. There can be some dumbbell work in there, but I generally, if I can, will avoid barbells. And there are many reasons for that, but the biggest one is just going to be how much more barbells tend to beat your body up than dumbbells or the alternative modalities. So that's a big one. I also tend to focus more on accessory work than I would otherwise do in like a full off season where we're really trying to put on strength and use that strength to kind of like push us into muscle growth. Whereas whenever we're recovering, we're not focused on getting stronger, right? We're focused on setting ourselves up to get stronger. So again, the best way to set yourself up to get stronger is to make sure that A, you have a lot of neuromuscular coordination. So getting your mind muscle connection back. B, mobility, making sure that every joint is as mobile as you can possibly get it within safe ranges, right? So if you're someone who has been just repeating the same exercises over and over and over and over and over again, 16 weeks out all the way up to your show, might be a good opportunity to do a different variation so that you can work through a slightly different range of motion. Very important. And then the biggest one that you want to make sure that you build on and you take care of before you get into off-season training is getting rid of all the aches, pains, nicks, issues that you're having with your joints, your muscles, tendons, and even I would say psychologically, anything that is more of a function or symptom of burnout, right? That absolutely has to be addressed. You do not want to go into off-season training, just like you wouldn't want to go into a prep, with carrying injuries over, things that are going to limit your ability to train hard in the off season, or carrying psychological fatigue, mental burnout. Why would you carry that into your off season, right? That makes no fucking sense. Take care of that shit in the first 8 weeks post show. Set yourself up for productive off season training. Because again, the first 8 weeks, you're not really growing. You're filling yourself back out. And even training that is focused on slightly different qualities, like single joint movements, like accessory work, like cables, machines, dumbbells, avoiding barbells, even stuff like that can build muscle. Like it absolutely can if it's done the right way in the right environment. But that should almost be like a secondary byproduct of recovering fully before you get into the off season. I think that so many people, very much like peak week, what we talked about, like they overestimate the importance of training and how, okay, maybe not the importance, they overestimate the impact that training can have positively towards growing muscle. Everybody expects there to be this like massive overcompensation effect, this massive bounce back in terms of your growth potential post show. But the reality is it's mostly just because you're sleeping better, you're eating more calories, you're doing less cardio, and you are better recovered. So whenever that happens, you fill out, you feel better, you get better training. A lot of that is psychological, but you're also going up in scale weight because you're retaining a lot of water, right? A fuck ton of water. And some of that can be in your muscles, which gives you the illusion that you're putting on a fuck ton of muscle. But if you did your prep the right way, you should not have atrophied very much. So there should not be a lot of overcompensation for you to have to make up in terms of muscle mass that you lost. So if you were injured and you came out of a cast, yeah, of course, like you're going to have like a bounce back effect. But if you handled your prep the way that you should not be gaining, 15 pounds of muscle mass in the first 8 weeks post show, unless you're someone who is natty, who just decided to throw in PEDs during that time, which I would also not recommend because again, your goal is recovery. PEDs are going to be impactful in a negative way to you recovering to get into the off season. So I would say the best way to approach that is if you're going to add in PEDs, add them in whenever you're most capable of training hard and you're in a caloric position to be able to take full advantage of those PEDs as well.
Yeah, no, I think that was a question I had for you, which was obviously it's not a myth. I think it's more like lore because there's truth in it,
Yeah.
but it just gets engorged by people who don't really know what they're talking about, which is the growth potential post being in a severe deficit for a long period of time. And it's like anything, right? Like I think if you think logically, like if you stretch something really, 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 really far and you allow it to return back to normal, the further you stretch that, the more impactful or extreme that snatch back. But we're not rubber bands. We're not nearly as feeble as those, right? And like you said, if you've done your prep the correct way, that bounce back period shouldn't look like when, someone hops on a slim fast diet for, 18 weeks and then hops off and then they put all that weight back on because they go back to eating right. Like it's not going to be like that. It shouldn't be like that because the tapering back up in your calories, the balancing of macros and that just kind of reversing period should be very, very intentional, and it should be moderately approached almost conservatively in the beginning to make sure that biofeedback is being taken into consideration and you are reacclimating appropriately. And so, yes, the growth potential is there, right? We understand that it is there. But like you mentioned in the previous podcast, even if you had optimal training, optimal energy levels, all just pertinent, unique to you, what is the risk in pushing it a little too hard while you're already really, really just vulnerable, to bad things happening? And like you said, in the first 8 weeks, like what is the potential for really good versus the potential for really bad if you don't do something correctly? And more people should recognize that. And it's not like it just evaporates after 8 weeks, 10 weeks. It's like, no, like you still have that growth potential. And now you can safely take advantage of it once you've returned to a more holistically recovered, position. Listening to you talk through a lot of this, the way I kind of macroscopically illustrate it to my clients is I go, hey, listen, like we're gonna come out the way we came in, right? Like we tapered out a lot of different damaging movements. We reduced risk, all of that on the way into the show. We're gonna do that in reverse, hopefully a bit more aggressively, because we hopefully get back to baseline sooner than we got to the show day. But the concept is there, right? And I think if you can grasp that, you can hopefully temper some of the derailing that happens when people get distracted, because they do have this surplus in calories, this surplus in energy. A lot of it is psychological, looking in the mirror and seeing all of your muscles and seeing them fooled and seeing the pumps and wanting to push and wanting to go, oh, if I don't get that extra rep today, if I don't go up in weight today, like I'm going to lose something. And it's like, no, you're more likely to lose something if you do that. And that is just, again, an important takeaway here.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that it is a good, it's a good idea to use the periodized cyclical rebound effect of deficit, and then kind of use that to springboard into growth potential, and use a deficit as a way to almost allow for that overcompensation effect to happen in terms of, like anabolism. And that is a real thing. But I think whenever your goal is prep oriented, your goal is to get as lean as possible, as conditioned as possible, and typically that is taking months.
Mm-hmm.
It's like 3, 4, 6 months long of prep. So if you're wanting to use a mini diet or something like that to go into like 4 to 6 weeks of a relatively drastic deficit, and use that as a way to springboard growth potential on the other side of that, and basically resensitize yourself to growth, right? Because again, everything does down regulate over time. So very similar to as you're going through a prep, your hormones are going to down regulate. Well, same thing as if you're in the off season and you're continuously slamming that muscle growth button, eventually you're not going to have the same response. If you're a newbie, you go to the gym, the first 6 months are awesome, and over time, it starts to trickle off. You don't get the same effects that you did at the very beginning. It is the same thing. It's very similar, right? And you can throw in a periodic mini diet, again, 4 to 6 weeks of a bit more aggressive dieting, to be able to hopefully kind of use that as like a deload, right? Where it's like, okay, this isn't going to be backwards, that's going to be more of a lateral step. Allow myself to sensitize again to growth, to that anabolic button being pressed. And then once I go back into a deficit, or excuse me, go back into a surplus, then I'll be better able to take advantage of that surplus. And I think that is a good strategy for advanced athletes, advanced bodybuilders, right? Because you should not just be consistently staying in a giant deficit all the time for multiple years. Like, you have to do something different. Otherwise, your body is just going to adapt to that. But I think that that's fundamentally different than a prep, because of all the things that we've already talked about, right? The duration, the extreme leanness, extreme fragility that comes with a prep, and that being the singular goal, singular focus over the entire previous 6 months. So whenever you have to change your goals on the other side of prep, it is much more challenging. I think that people sometimes forget that the goal does not immediately shift into build muscle and get strong. There's an intermediary period within that where you have to go hang out in recovery zone before you earn the right to get into muscle building and get strong zone. And most people feel like they can't skip that over. They're just like, you know what? I don't really think that I need to go into that little intermediary recovery place. I think that I can just jump right into off-season training. But you can't. You absolutely can't. If you're someone who prepped the right way, who did it for an extended period of time, and got lean enough to be semi-competitive on stage, you need a recovery break. You do. You have to do that. And I'm even someone who is very strongly a proponent of, at some point during your recovery phase post-show, you should probably take like a week off from training completely. Typically, I like to do that whenever my client has mostly recover. Like basically we're at a point where they're about to transition into like a full off-season training. I'm like, all right, let's just take a full week off. Let's go ahead and do it. Go on vacation, stay at home, lay in bed. I don't give a shit, but just do not go to the gym. And that usually, if everything else has been done correctly, that will be very, very hard for them to do. Because by that point, they should feel mostly on the other side of that psychological burnout. They should be feeling itching to go to the gym. But that's where you want them to be. You don't want your clients, 6 weeks after a show to feel like they're dragging ass just to get to the gym. They're like, I don't want to be here. I have no motivation. I just want to sit at home and sleep and, eat my feelings away. If your clients feel like that, if you feel like that post show, that is not a good sign for you to be able to consistently push for the entirety of the off season, getting into your next prep, right? So what you have to do is you have to stay one step ahead of your recovery. So the best way to do that is, again, like 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks of that post-show training. Keep it relatively chill, relatively scaled back. It can be qualitatively different. Sometimes I like to throw my clients into more of like a metabolic phase. So they're going through higher reps, shorter rest periods. Again, the exercise selection is mostly staying towards conservative movements, potentially using intensity techniques that are going to be more blood flow focused. So things like blood flow restriction, load drop sets, mechanical drop sets. Again, everything focused towards beneficial risk reward. So we're not going to be doing that shit on like fucking hack squats or leg press. But again, like provided you are taking care of all of the other things, you can add in intensity techniques that are low in their systemic kit.
Yeah.
And they're not going to add a fuck ton of general fatigue. But yeah, like even if you do absolutely everything right, I think that before you go into your off-season training, it's probably a good idea to just take a week completely off from the gym. Most people have no conception as to how little time 1 week is in the grand scheme of training and exercise. 1 week in nutrition can do some damage. It can. 1 week of taking off from the gym will literally not do anything to your physique, to your strength, to your coordination. If anything, it will only improve.
Yeah.
It will only improve because you will be able to drop that fatigue and you will be able to get rid of a lot of the inflammation, and you'll go back more refreshed and feel better and have better training. So I've always been so confused as like why people don't regularly take a full week off from the gym, like me, maybe 3-4 times a year. Just don't go to the gym for a week. Nothing is going to happen. You're going to be okay. But I also do understand like the psychological aspect of that, where it feels like, and it's hard to convince people that it's not, it feels like it's a backwards step.
Well, there's also the, nutrition is, well, you can usually enact quicker and more visible changes with changes, especially drastic changes in nutrition. The acute spike, that you get to see when you're in the gym and you get a really good pump.
Yeah.
Like psychologically, I think the idea of letting that go and then like looking in the mirror in the morning and feeling flat and not having those little dopamine hits while you're at the gym of seeing your delts pop or seeing your glutes pop, I think it just fucks with people. And I think that is probably, for me, the most important piece is the psychological part, right? We talked about just the post-show blues. And those look different for everybody. And I stand by this. Like how you show up in your off season, to me, is very indicative of the kind of athlete you are. You think about the off season in traditional quote unquote sports that, like 2-a-days for football or summer league basketball. And like these players practice, like they have their time off, but then they practice hard and deliberate, and everything is focused on the macro goal of getting back into season, being back in playoffs, getting back to the championship or whatever, the biggest game is, right? But we see so often people just fuck off, get distracted, lose focus in off season when it comes down to bodybuilding. And I think that definitely, I'm sure that you'd echo this, but like privately, at least, if not eventually more explicitly, depending on just my relationship with the client, I'll call that out. I'm like, hey, listen, like, just so you know, this is not what potential pros do. This is not what people who perform really, really well at anything, especially in this sport, do. And if you focus, turn on your high beams and really see long distance and what your goals are and align today with that, that's okay. But I think it's something that you want to recognize in yourself and go, you know what? Maybe this is just like a hobby. Maybe this is just something I want to do occasionally for fun and community and stuff like that, because that is 100% okay. But if you're like, road to pro, this is what I want to do, like da. But then like you're fucking off. Then I'm like, maybe you rethink that, because I think you're going to be let down. You're going to probably drastically fall short of what it is you are telling yourself and others that you are going to do. And being able to, like you said, really lock in, maintain focus, understand that, hey, like I'm not trying to get it all in this first 4 to 8 weeks, that I am really just setting a tone for my off season to be just as deliberate, be just as prepared as I try to prepare myself for prep. That is huge, right? There are rights to earn, right? Like you mentioned earlier, like I want to earn the right to be able to do these things. And it's just very, very overlooked. And I think that you have people that swing one or the other way, right? You have people who very quickly rebound into the direction of, I want no structure. I want to be able to eat pizza. I want to be able to go and travel with my family and hang out with friends on the weekend. And that is okay. But also it works against the main goal if your goal is to compete again. And then you have people who are so regimented that they refuse to dive into any level of flexibility, which that just brings its own just psychological and mental and emotional turmoil that you want to make sure that you are aware of and consciously working towards undoing and unshackling. Real feedback is huge. Being honest with yourself and not just going, oh, I need to tough it out. Oh, I need to keep going. I need to keep training harder. Like when your coach is telling you, hey, I need to know, like, how are we feeling this week? Like not lying about feeling like you're dragging ass, not lying about feeling like you don't want to go to the gym, because we all see it, right? You're just strolling through, right? You're feeling good as a coach. Week 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like, oh yeah, things are good. Energy levels. And then week 5 hits and you're like, I just feel like I don't even want to be here. It's just a task for me to show up. I hate it. I'm getting so burnt out. And I'm like, where was this rhetoric the last 4 weeks? Or were you just under this illusion that you had to be like, I need to be all in and to keep going? And it's like, no, like this is a good time to really listen to your body, because like you said, in the grand scheme, what's a week? What's a week in 52? What's a week in 100? Right? Like you're talking about multiple years in this sport. Like what is a week of just like, I slept an extra hour. I chilled. I watched all my shows. Like I got to relax a little bit. It's nothing. It's absolutely nothing.
The easiest way to tell, the easiest sign that you can look for that someone is struggling is a decrease in posting frequency on social media. And that's always something that I like peripherally pay attention to with my clients. Is you'll see around their show, they're posting on their stories 5, 6, 10 times a day, just like selfie, ab shot, like look at my glutes. And then 4 weeks post show, it's like, I haven't seen anything from them on social media in a couple of days. Like, are they still alive? Is everything okay over there? And that is just the simplest way to be able to tell that someone is starting to struggle, not even just with what we're talking about, mostly like the X's and O's of like training and even, diets, like not necessarily that they're struggling with those things. They're probably just struggling with body image. And that in itself can spill over into making it so much harder to adhere to what you're supposed to be doing, because whenever your body image starts to go to shit, then all of a sudden, none of the other things that you're supposed to be doing, following your programming, following your diet, your macros, your supplementation, getting good sleep, none of that seems to matter too much, because you're like, well, I've been following all this stuff the best that I can and it's still not working. I look like shit. I've gained all this weight. Like, why would I continue to do this? I might as well just stop. I might as well just go off plan, email my coach, tell them that like, I can't do this anymore. I need a break. FY, that's the worst fucking thing you could ever do, by the way. So like we've had many clients over the years send us that email 4-6 weeks out. Like, I just need a break. I just need a break. I have a lot going on. It's like, no, you're not taking a break. I'm sorry to say this, because if you take a break, we will never hear from you again. And you're going to show up in a year and you'll look like a very different human being. And we've seen this over and over and over again. And it's unfortunate. It really is so unfortunate. And not to say necessarily that we could have prevented that if they would have, stuck with us or coached under us, or, someone else would have been able to help. Sometimes, like people just have dormant issues, whether that's with, body image or food insecurities, but that still should not happen nearly as often as it does. And maybe it is just this malformed idea of competing and a glorification of being on stage and being so lean, and people not necessarily wanting to talk about all of the ways that it can fuck you up, and the ways that like you need to be prepared going in before you diet down to single digit body fat and absolutely destroy your hormones. Like, people just don't understand the potential repercussions. So like you did mention a second ago that if you're not ready for prep, like you should not go into prep. Like, and thinking of it in terms of the off season as well, like you need to take the off season as seriously as you do prep, and there can't be a gigantic divide between those two. I think that's very important. Obviously, in the off season, you have a greater margin for error, you have more flexibility, but you don't have the flexibility to fuck off all the time, right? If you go on vacation, you drink a little bit, you hang out at the resort, you don't train for a few days, nothing is going to happen. You'll be okay. You'll be able to bounce back from that. But if you're in the off season, you're consistently training at 75%, that's going to fuck you. Like, it's going to fuck you. So you need to understand that all the time. But what is so incredibly important, this kind of like brings us all the way back, is getting into your off season, very much like starting a prep. If you are not in a conducive state to be able to maximize that off season or that prep, then you're already fucked. You might as well not even try. And I hate to say it like that, but like, you have to do the work before you get into prep. You have to do the work before you get into off season. And the work that gets done before you get into off season is in that transitory period. So if you fuck off and gain 20 pounds of body fat before you even make it into your off season, you fucked yourself. It's going to be so much harder to gain muscle consistently without pushing your body composition into a negative range in terms of body fat percentages, right? And there is a sweet spot. There is like this golden range of body composition for men and women where you can relatively easily gain muscle mass while not putting on additional body fat. But once you get above that, body fat will run away. Every pound you add will be the majority body fat, at least as a proportion relative to, you being in that golden range. So that's why it's so important to stay relatively lean and not lose your fucking mind post show. You have to be structured. You have to be diligent. You have to be on your shit until you earn the right to be flexible. So I'm also very much a proponent of like, do not just feel like you can add in cheat meals. You can't. You cannot add in, like, psychologically, you're too fragile post show to feel like you can add in cheat meals. You have to eat basically the same shit that you did during prep for quite a while until you get back to a normal place psychologically. And again, hormonally, you have to do that. And it sucks. It absolutely sucks. But you have to do the work to be able to earn eating the good food again, the tasty food again, having untracked days or untracked meals, or being able to train hard, earning that barbell in your hands again. If you don't do the work in that recovery period, you're going to fuck yourself. You're going to get hurt during the off season at some point because you never wiped the slate clean of your fatigue. You never took care of those aches and pains that were nagging you during prep. You just kept pushing through them during that, what was supposed to be your recovery phase. And you just push the issue into your off season whenever that's supposed to be your most productive training. Don't do that. It's not that hard. Don't fucking do that. right? You have to deal with issues at some point or another. You can either deal with them whenever you're trying to recover everything else, which makes the most sense, right? If you're trying to recover your metabolism, your hormones, your recover from psychological burnout. If you're trying to do all of those things, you might as well just allow your physical body to recover also. And if you need to, take a step from training your legs to allow your knees to recover, for example, well, would you rather do that in the 3-4 weeks out, or post show, or would you rather do that in the middle of your off season? Whenever you're eating a fuck ton, potentially you're in the middle of like a PED cycle, right? Like, no, you want to do these things all at once, get it out of the way so that you can be extremely productive. Whenever you're training, your nutrition, your supplements have to be the most productive. They all have to be the most aligned. That was just kind of like one thing I wanted to at least end on, because it's so important. If you fuck the off season up, your prep is already ruined. If you fuck your prep up, your peak week is ruined. So nothing you can do during peak week is going to save you if you're fat. Sorry, right? If you fuck up that transition period post show, your off season is ruined. It's ruined. And it's going to be very hard to save, because you're going to have to basically course correct in the middle of your off season, which means that progress is going to be much harder to come by, much slower, and potentially stagnant, right? Because if you're, for example, having to focus so hard on keeping your body fat in a healthy range to prevent yourself from getting too fat because you fucked up post show, well, you're probably going to have to do much more frequent mini diets during your off season. So rather than it being like every 16 weeks going to like a 4-week mini diet, maybe it's like every 8 weeks you have to go into a mini diet just to make sure you're not too fat. It's not good. It's not good. Same thing with recovery. If you make it 12 weeks and every 12th week you have to go into 4 weeks of super low intensity lower body training because your knees are too beat up and they just can't take it, you're really, really screwing yourself over. I mean, in sum, all of this, I think it can be really just framed from the position of like understanding what the goal is at various times during your competitive year, and understanding the goal of peak week, like what we talked about during the last episode. It's so straightforward, right? It's like you're using that as a supplement to nutrition. That's so straightforward. Don't do too much, but like you can't really fuck it up unless you are just an idiot, right? But again, understanding what that goal is. But post-show training has much more of an impact because there are so many more ways that you can fuck it up. And the goal there is recovery. It's not get strong, it's not get big, it's recover. And if you happen to get strong and big as an accidental byproduct of the training that you're doing that is recovery focused, then that's awesome. That's great. That should not be the primary goal. I swear to God, that's where so many people just get it all backwards. They mess it up, and they're just not understanding what you should be doing as an athlete. And as an athlete, you always have to be looking 6 months ahead, a year ahead, 2 years ahead. You have to be thinking long term if you want to be successful at this. And if you're only focused on what is going to make you look better for the selfie that you're taking after that workout, then you're not a real athlete.
Yes, the last 2 sentences you had there, long term and not a real athlete, right? You're not a real bodybuilder. And it sounds probably coarse to a few people that are listening, probably to most people that are listening, but I stand by that. I back that statement 120%, because like you said, the long term. And I have a couple of other different things that I'll close on. For me, I think, especially for women, but men as well, a lot of the like pussyfooting, a lot of the hesitation in eating, and like you said, the body comp, the body image issues, people are afraid to put weight on. They're afraid to lose their shreds. And I think if more people were honest, they're afraid because they know the work it took to get to that point and they don't want to lose it. And if that is how you're thinking, understand that that's again, not a real athlete, because you should know that you could do it again and you should be prepared to do it again. And if you're so afraid to lose it because you'll have to do it again, then you're not a long-term bodybuilder. Like, you did something that was fun, great, but like, you're not a long-term bodybuilder, and you should probably hang them up. Also, to an earlier point you mentioned, about people leaving. And I think that like I know I have to do this with a couple of my clients where I have to remind them like, hey dude, there's no pressure from me to be 100%. There's no pressure from me to be on your P's and Q's, dialed in mentally, physically, every single week. That's the difference between, in my mind, a coach and a personal trainer, right? When you show up and you talk to that personal trainer and you're there for that 45 minutes to an hour and a half, they expect you to be focused, dialed in, because that's the only time they know you. They don't know you in your life. To bail on, your coaching experience or your service when you probably need it most, right? Because we don't just help people stay dialed in, we help people adjust to their life, right? Hey, you have kids. Hey, you have vacation coming up. Hey, you're getting married soon. Hey, whatever's going on in your life, that's when you need a coach. How can we take the 5 days we've been training and titrate it down to 3? So we're still effective, but we're not burning ourselves out. We're not losing in other areas of our life that are really, really important. That is when you need your coach most, because what will happen is you'll drift very quickly into an all nothing mentality. You won't be able to do it on your own. And like you said, they come back as very different individuals wanting help. And it's like, great, we'll help you course correct this. We'll help you get back on track. And also, like, we probably could have at least avoided this swing, but everyone's got to go through their own journey. So by all means, you guys got to do what you got to do. But I think that this brought up a lot of really cool things. I think that maybe the next episode, or maybe in a week or so, we also talk just about the pitfalls of competing, like, and things that people should take in consideration before deciding, like, even on a one-off, like, I just want to get on stage once. It's like, even just once, you should know what it cost. You should know what comes with this if done well, right? Because I don't think everyone does it well. But if done well, it's going to take its pound of flesh. Actually, it's going to take several pounds usually. So it is important for you to know exactly what you're getting yourself into, and that it's not just the 12 to 18 to 20 weeks or whatever. It is the post show. It is the reverse. It is the potential off season if you want to do it again. Like, it's a lot more than what you just see on people's social media, because like you said, people aren't shredding anymore and they're not counting down, the prep weeks. They vanish. So you only see the shine. You only see all the outpouring adoration on their show day and stuff like that. You don't see what is going on with them internally. You don't see them putting weight back on and, just the less pretty part of preps. Definitely probably worth a conversation.
You also can't see what's going on inside their body. You can't see what is going on in their bank account.
Mm-hmm.
You can't see what's going on in their head either. So it's just so easy for people to put up a front whenever they're portraying their life to other people. And I mean, we all do this shit, right? Like, no one wants people to know how unhealthy they are, or how, fucked up they're on the head, or how poor they are, or how shitty their relationship is, right? Like, everyone wants to keep up the best public image possible. And it's no different with competing, right? Like, everyone wants to make it seem like they handle prep better than everyone else. And it's just not an accurate representation of the struggles that will come to every single person, right? And yes, there are some people who just genetically or dispositionally are more cut out for something like bodybuilding. And, they're probably the people that are going to be successful at this long term. Some people maybe want to just do this as like a bucket list item. They're like, I want to get on stage. I want to do this for me. I'm going to do it once, and then I know that I'm done. That's great. That's cool. I think that that's an awesome goal to have. But if you're someone who tells yourself that this is a long-term thing for you, but you treat it as a recreational hobby that someone would do it if they're just trying to cross it off a list, it's going to just crush you. Like, you're going to get steamrolled by competing because you don't understand the consequences and, like what you said, the costs that are associated with doing this fucking sport. And it's not even just physical costs, like monetary costs. This shit is really expensive if you want to do it a reasonably high level. And it can suck you in because you feel like, oh, I can keep my expenses relatively low at the beginning. No, that's the less, or excuse me, the least that they will ever be, because then you're going to add a coach, then you're going to add supplements, then you're going to shift your diet in a very specific way. Then
Not,
you're going to have multiple different suits. You're going to have all the show day shit that you have to
not
pay for,
everyone
travel you
has
have to pay for.
regional good shows, right? If you want to go to
Yeah,
nationals, if you like the travel that comes into it, in the past.
the best gym in your area, which it's almost a prerequisite. If you want to be extremely competitive, you have to have access to the best equipment as well. Because if you're someone who trains at a home gym, possible, I mean, it is possible. I have clients who compete at a very high level with a home gym, but it's obviously not ideal. If you're someone who has a hack squat at home and you don't have a belt squat, I mean, it's great out of the alternatives, but I mean, you could do better. And your competitors, people that you're going up against, are doing better in terms of their exercise selection. And whenever the margins are razor thin, that could be the difference, right? So most people tend to not take those chances and then just go out all out with spending for this sport. So it's what might start as $100 a month quickly turns into $2,000 a month. And most people don't understand that until they're so sucked in that they have no other recourse but to continue to spend more money on bodybuilding. So probably a good idea to understand what you're getting yourself into before you just make that swan dive in.
No, 100%. I think that's an excellent segue and leave off point. Thank you all for tuning in to this part 2 of what we take into consideration while working with our competitive bodybuilding athletes. If you got something from this, please let us know in the comments. If you want to share about your own experience, your own journey, if you have questions on your own, obviously hit us up with those as well. And yeah, we thank you. We will see you next time.